Rinkeby is part of Stockholm's municipal district called Järva. This land used to be a military training ground until it was turned into residential areas as part of the Million program in the late 60s and early 70s. Originally targeting the growing working and middle classes in big cities like Stockholm, where housing shortages were a serious issue, over time the middle classes would move out of these areas to other neighbourhoods with much larger single-family houses. This would leave only the poorest people in the Million program's projects, particularly the quickly growing migrant population. Nowadays, over 90% of Rinkeby's inhabitants have a migrant background, and over 50% of those are of African descent, particularly Somalian, a community which began arriving in Sweden as refugees after the start of the Somali civil war in the late 80s and early 90s, leading to the suburbs of these areas sometimes being referred to as Little Mogadishu. Unfortunately, according to the Swedish police, many of Järva's suburbs, including Rinkeby and the neighbouring Tensta and Husby, are at the top of Sweden's so-called vulnerable areas list. These are the areas that sometimes international media have erroneously labelled as no-go zones, but officially these are areas that have the highest levels of crime, poverty, and general social exclusion from the broader society. Signs of serious social issues amongst Rinkeby's youth became public already in 2010 when large riots broke out in the suburb, and a few years later in 2013, similar riots started to spread to the neighbouring suburb of Husby, where at least 100 cars were burned, by this point with rioting spreading all over Stockholm. It's probably not surprising then that after drill culture began spreading from the troubled neighbourhoods of Chicago's South Side all around the world in the early 2010s, that Järva was one of the places where it took hold and inspired the local lost youths. In fact, one of the first rappers from the area to represent this style of music was an artist from the suburb of Husby called 24K, who would even use clips from the 2013 riots in his suburbs in his music videos to paint a picture of what was going on in the area. This song, with a title translating to "A Guy from the Program," would interestingly be an early showcase of some of the main enemies that we'll be discussing later in this story, showing that, as often the case in these long-running drill conflicts, there was once a time when they were all friends, appearing together in the same music videos. Here you can see two guys from the Death Patrol and two guys from the Shotters. Masla from Death Patrol being the guy in the middle who raises a finger to his lips, along with Makalele from Death Patrol directly to the left of him wearing a black hoodie, while Hamza from the Shotters is to the left of him and Faye from the Shotters is there all the way to the right. This is a link-up that would later become unthinkable as these groups would descend into an all-out gang war. Now, a few different youths from Rinkeby would also begin releasing music around this time, under a movement that was called BBE, or Bin Block Entertainment. Bin commonly being a nickname for Rinkeby, meaning the village. The most known rappers from this movement are Jafar Bin and Yasin Bin, the latter also making a cameo in 24K's earlier music video. These two would both later become affiliated with the group The Shotters, but long before that gang war had emerged, they would begin dropping UK drill-inspired street freestyles and cyphers around 2014. Now, their influence came much more from the UK gangster road rap and drill rap scene, which had already begun forming in the years earlier. This is actually something that was mentioned in Jafar Bin's 2015 song Ghetto Style, where he says F Swedish hip-hop, what he's doing is more like the UK, going on to shout out legends of UK street rap like Rimsey, Nines, and Jay Spades. However, in the mid-2010s, the youngsters from Rinkeby were not just rapping about the street life. While they weren't yet hardened gang leaders, they were commonly getting involved in various criminal activities, such as robberies and drug dealing. In 2015, one particular robbery would end up causing friction between a friend group that would lead to a years-long war and would end up claiming numerous young lives. A falling out that would lead to the formation of an infamous gang that would end up sowing fear all over Northern Europe and even beyond.